The rhythmic clicking of the keyboard echoed through the expansive office as Alexander Morgan, the 34-year-old billionaire CEO of Apex Enterprises, pored over his latest acquisition deal. A man of singular focus and unyielding ambition, Alexander had built his empire from scratch, a feat achieved through an almost pathological devotion to his work. His entire existence revolved around profit margins, board meetings, and a meticulously crafted daily schedule. Tonight was no different until his phone buzzed. At first he ignored it, assuming it was just another email notification or a reminder from his assistant, but then it buzzed again, insistently. Reluctantly, he glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Alexander sighed, picking it up and answering curtly. Morgan speaking. A female voice on the other end spoke quickly, her tone both urgent and professional. Mr. Morgan, this is St. Francis Hospital. We need you to come immediately. It's regarding your child. The pen in Alexander's hand froze mid-air and he blinked, certain he had misheard. My what? Your child, sir. A baby boy, born earlier today, the nurse clarified. The child has a rare blood condition and needs a transfusion. Your blood type matches perfectly. We've already cross-referenced your records. Alexander felt as though the ground beneath his feet had disappeared. A child? He didn't have a child. That was impossible. There must be some mistake. I think you've got the wrong Alexander Morgan. Sir, the nurse's voice softened. The mother listed you as the father before passing out. The child's blood type and yours are a match. Please, we don't have much time. His heart thumped in his chest. Before he could think, let alone argue, the call disconnected, leaving him gripping the phone like a lifeline. 15 minutes later, Alexander's black Maserati screeched into the hospital parking lot. Dressed in a tailored suit, his polished appearance was entirely out of place amidst the chaos of the emergency room. A nurse quickly ushered him toward the neonatal unit. Wait, he demanded, his voice like steel. Where's the mother? I need answers. The nurse hesitated, clearly weighing whether or not she could divulge information. Finally, she gestured to a private room at the end of the hall. She's stable, but sedated. You can speak with her later. Right now, your son needs you. Those words sent a jolt through him. Your son. The nurse led him to a small incubator, where a fragile, pink-faced baby lay connected to monitors. Alexander stood frozen, staring at the infant. He had no idea what to feel. Anger? Confusion? Fear? The tiny human in front of him seemed impossibly small, yet something deep within him stirred, a flicker of protectiveness. The nurse interrupted his spiraling thoughts. We need to start the transfusion now. Please come with me. The next hour passed in a blur. As the nurses worked efficiently, Alexander found himself in an unfamiliar fog. His mind kept circling back to one question. How is this possible? He hadn't been in a serious relationship for over a year. His last fiancée, Lily, had vanished 9 months ago, leaving no explanation. He had searched for her, hired investigators, and even offered a reward for information. But it was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Could this child? No, it didn't make sense. Why wouldn't she have told him? Why leave? After the transfusion, he was allowed back into the neonatal unit. The baby, now stabilized, slept peacefully. Alexander stood at the edge of the crib, staring at the delicate features of the boy. His features weren't entirely unfamiliar. The sharp nose, the slight curl in the hair, the stubborn set of the jaw. It was like looking into a mirror from years ago. Hours later, a doctor approached him. The baby's doing well now, Mr. Morgan. You may see the mother. She's awake. Alexander walked toward Lily's room, his emotions boiling under his calm exterior. When he entered, his breath caught. There she was, the woman he had once believed he would spend his life with. Her auburn hair was damp, her face pale, but her green eyes widened as they met his. Alex, she whispered, her voice raw. Lily. His voice was colder than he intended. You owe me an explanation. Now. Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to sit up. No, he interrupted, his voice rising. You disappeared without a word. I searched for you, and now I find out I have a son from a hospital call. Do you have any idea? Stop! Lily's voice cracked, but her hands clenched the bedsheets. You don't know what I went through. Alexander narrowed his eyes. Then enlighten me. Lily took a shaky breath, and the words spilled out in a rush. Your mother told me I was ruining your life. She said I was a distraction, that you'd never reach your potential with me around, and she threatened me, Alex. She said if I didn't leave, she'd destroy my family. The words hit him like a freight train. What? She said you didn't really love me, Lily continued, tears streaming down her face. And at the time I believed her. She was so convincing, so cruel. I didn't want to hold you back. I thought I was doing what was best for you. Alexander felt like the air had been knocked out of him. His mother had always been cold and calculating, but this was unforgivable. And why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? He demanded. I found out after I left, she said, her voice trembling. By the time I realized I was too scared to come back, I thought you hated me. Alexander stared at her, the weight of her words settling over him. Anger, betrayal, and guilt tangled within him. His mother's lies had stolen 9 months from him. 9 months he could have spent preparing to be a father. 9 months of supporting Lily through her pregnancy. A soft cry interrupted his thoughts. A nurse entered, carrying the baby. He's ready for his mother. Lily's face softened as she reached for the child. The baby nestled against her chest, and for the first time, Alexander saw her smile. It wasn't the radiant smile he remembered, but it was there, fragile and beautiful. Something shifted inside him. This wasn't just about betrayal or anger anymore. This was his family, and he would be damned if he let anything or anyone tear it apart again. As Alexander stood there, watching Lily hold their child, determination hardened in his chest. He would get answers, and he would protect them both. But first he needed to confront the one person who had orchestrated this entire mess, his mother. Alexander left the hospital that night with his thoughts in turmoil, the weight of the revelations pressing heavily on his chest. As the sleek black Maserati cut through the empty city streets, his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. He had built his life on control of his company, his image, his future. But now, for the first time in years, he felt like everything was slipping through his fingers. His mother, the woman he had trusted and revered his entire life. Had she truly gone so far as to sabotage his relationship? To drive away the one person he had ever envisioned spending his life with? And what had been her endgame? Protecting him? Protecting the family legacy? Or simply controlling him like another piece on her chessboard? The questions churned in his mind as he parked outside his penthouse. Normally, the sprawling apartment with its panoramic views of the city skyline offered him solace. Tonight, it felt cold, sterile, and unwelcoming. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling as he sat by the floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights below sparkled like tiny stars, mocking him with their stability. He thought of the child, his son, sleeping in the hospital, so small and vulnerable. Then he thought of Lily, her tear-streaked face as she recounted the lies his mother had fed her. A pang of guilt twisted in his chest. He should have seen through his mother's manipulations. He should have fought harder for Lily. But regret was a useless currency. Alexander had always been a man of action, and now he had 2 priorities: to protect Lily and his son, and to confront his mother. The next morning, Alexander strode into his mother's estate, a sprawling mansion nestled in the hills overlooking the city. The house was as cold and imposing as the woman who lived there, every inch of it a testament to wealth and control. He didn't bother announcing himself. The staff knew better than to get in his way when he was like this. He found her in the sunroom, sipping tea as if she didn't have a care in the world. Eleanor Morgan was a striking woman, even in her 60s. Her sharp features and perfectly coiffed silver hair gave her an air of elegance, but her eyes held the glint of steel. She looked up as he entered, her expression calm but guarded. "Alexander," she said, setting down her teacup. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "Cut the act, Mother," he snapped, his voice colder than the winter morning outside. "We need to talk." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, unbothered by his tone. "About what?" "About Lily and my son." For the first time, her composure faltered. A flicker of something, guilt, regret, crossed her face, but it was gone in an instant. "Ah, so she finally told you," Eleanor said, leaning back in her chair. "I wondered how long it would take." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You knew she was pregnant and you didn't tell me?" "She didn't even know at first," Eleanor replied, her tone maddeningly calm. "And by the time she did, she was gone. You were focused on your career, Alexander. I was protecting you." "Protecting me," His voice rose, his anger boiling over. "You destroyed the one thing in my life that wasn't about work, and for what? To keep me focused. You had no right." Eleanor sighed, her expression turning icy. "I had every right. That girl was a distraction. She didn't understand the demands of your life, your responsibilities. I did what needed to be done." "What you did," Alexander said, his voice shaking with fury, "was drive away the woman I loved and rob me of 9 months with my son. Do you even hear yourself? Do you even care?" Eleanor's lips tightened, but she didn't respond. For the first time in his life, Alexander saw her for what she truly was, a woman who valued control and power above all else, even at the expense of her own family. "You will stay away from Lily and my son," he said, his tone final. "If I find out you've interfered in their lives again, you'll regret it." With that, he turned on his heel and walked out, leaving Eleanor sitting alone in her immaculate sunroom, the cracks in her facade finally showing. Over the next few weeks, Alexander threw himself into repairing the damage his mother had caused. He visited Lily and the baby, whom she had named Noah, every day, bringing flowers, food, and an unwavering determination to make things right. At first, Lily was wary of his intentions. She had loved him once, deeply, but the pain of his apparent abandonment still lingered. "It's not that simple, Alex," she said one evening, as they sat in the small hospital room, watching Noah sleep. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to go back to the way it was." "I know," he said softly, his usually confident demeanor replaced by vulnerability. "But I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a chance to prove to you that I'm not the man my mother made me out to be. I want to be here for you and Noah, whatever it takes." Lily studied him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. Finally, she nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "All right, but it's going to take time." Time was something Alexander was willing to give. He had spent years pouring his energy into building his company. Now, he poured that same energy into rebuilding the trust he had lost with Lily. He attended every doctor's appointment, learned how to change diapers, though he wasn't particularly good at it, and even endured sleepless nights in the cramped apartment Lily had been living in. For the first time in his life, Alexander Morgan was discovering what it meant to truly care for someone other than himself. But the road to redemption was not without its obstacles. As news of Alexander's newfound fatherhood began to spread, the media latched onto the story with a vengeance. Paparazzi camped outside Lily's apartment, and tabloids churned out lurid headlines speculating about the baby's paternity and the state of Alexander and Lily's relationship. Lily, who had always shied away from the spotlight, struggled to cope with the sudden intrusion into her life. "I can't do this," she said one evening, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want Noah growing up in this circus." "We'll fix it," Alexander promised, his protective instincts kicking into overdrive. He hired a security team to guard Lily and Noah, moved them into a private residence under a false name, and issued a statement to the press demanding privacy for his family. But the media wasn't the only challenge they faced. Eleanor, true to form, wasn't about to relinquish control so easily. She reached out to Alexander, claiming she wanted to make amends, but he saw through her ploy. "Stay out of this, Mother," he told her firmly. "You've done enough damage." Undeterred, Eleanor tried to contact Lily directly, showing up unannounced at her apartment one afternoon. Lily, still recovering from the trauma of their last encounter, slammed the door in her face. "I don't want anything to do with her," she told Alexander later. "She's toxic." "I know," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I'm sorry for everything she's put you through, but I promise she won't come near you or Noah again." As the weeks turned into months, a fragile sense of normalcy began to settle over their lives. Alexander and Lily grew closer, their shared love for Noah bridging the gap between their fractured past and an uncertain future. They spent hours talking, not just about the baby, but about their hopes, fears, and the pain they had endured. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their new home, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Alexander turned to Lily. "I never stopped loving you," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I know I've made mistakes, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me." Tears filled Lily's eyes as she looked at him. "I never stopped loving you either," she admitted. "But love isn't enough, Alex. We have to trust each other, and that's something we'll need to rebuild." "We will," he promised, taking her hand in his. together. As they sat there with Noah sleeping peacefully inside and the future stretching out before them, it felt like the first real step toward healing. But just as they began to believe in the possibility of a happy ending, a shadow from their past emerged, threatening to unravel everything they had fought to rebuild. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind for Alexander, Lily, and their son Noah. Slowly but steadily they were carving out a semblance of normalcy, though the scars of their turbulent past still lingered beneath the surface. Lily had begun to trust Alexander again, cautiously opening up to the man she once loved, while Alexander immersed himself in fatherhood with a dedication that surprised even himself. But just as the fractures of their past seemed to be mending, a new storm began to brew, one that threatened to shatter the fragile peace they had fought so hard to build. It started innocently enough, a late-night email from an anonymous sender. Alexander had been in his office reviewing quarterly reports when the notification popped up. The subject line read, "The truth about Eleanor Morgan." Curiosity piqued. Alexander clicked on it. The email was short, almost cryptic. "You think you know what your mother has done, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. Check the attached file. The truth might destroy her and save you." Alexander's first instinct was to dismiss it as a hoax, but something about the tone, the specificity, made his stomach churn. Against his better judgment, he opened the attachment. It was a series of scanned documents, financial records, legal filings, and what appeared to be confidential emails. The pieces didn't make sense at first, but as he read further, a chilling realization began to take shape. His mother hadn't just manipulated Lily into leaving. She had orchestrated a years-long campaign to control every aspect of his personal and professional life. There were records of bribes paid to board members, secret meetings to sabotage potential partnerships, even a falsified psychiatric report that Eleanor had used to discredit one of Alexander's closest allies. But the most damning revelation was buried in a series of emails dated 9 months ago, the same time Lily had disappeared. In them, Eleanor had written to a private investigator, instructing him to track Lily's movements and ensure she stayed gone. One email even suggested a payment to Lily's landlord to evict her, leaving her without a stable place to live. Alexander's blood ran cold. His mother's betrayal was deeper and darker than he had ever imagined. The next morning, Alexander confronted his mother for the second time. This time, there was no room for pretense or civility. "I know everything," he said, slamming the stack of documents onto her desk. Eleanor glanced at the papers, her expression unreadable. "And what, exactly, do you think you've uncovered?" "Stop pretending, Mother," he snapped. "The bribes, the sabotage, the lies you told Lily to drive her away, everything. I have the proof." For the first time, Eleanor's mask of composure slipped. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice sharp. But Alexander saw the flicker of fear in her eyes, and it only fueled his anger. "You've been controlling me my entire life," he said, his voice rising. "But this, ruining Lily's life, endangering my son, you've gone too far." "Everything I did was for your own good," Eleanor shot back, her tone defiant. "Lily was weak, a liability. She would have dragged you down, and you know it." "No," Alexander said, his voice low but deadly. "What I know is that you're a manipulative, power-hungry woman who can't stand the idea of losing control. But you've lost, Mother. Stay out of my life. Stay out of Lily's life. And if you ever try to come near Noah again, I will make sure the world knows exactly what kind of person you are." Eleanor's face twisted with rage, but she said nothing as Alexander turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. For a while, it seemed like Eleanor had finally been defeated. But the shadow of her influence was not so easily banished. A week later, Lily received an anonymous letter in the mail. The envelope contained photos, grainy black-and-white images of Alexander meeting with a woman in a dimly lit restaurant. The note attached read, "Old habits die hard. Be careful who you trust." Lily's hands trembled as she stared at the photos. She knew she should show them to Alexander, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered doubts. Could he still be hiding something from her? Could the man who had once been so consumed by his work truly have changed? When Alexander returned home that evening, he found Lily pacing the living room, the photos spread out on the coffee table. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with both anger and hurt. Alexander's brow furrowed as he picked up the photos. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Where did these come from?" "They were sent to me," Lily said, crossing her arms. "No, just this." Alexander stared at the images, his mind racing. The woman in the photos was a business associate, someone he had met with to discuss a potential merger. But the angle of the shots, the lighting, it was clear they had been taken to suggest something more. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, meeting Lily's eyes. "That woman is a colleague. We had dinner to discuss a deal. That's all." Lily wanted to believe him, but the wounds of their past still lingered. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "If it was so innocent, why keep it a secret?" "I didn't think it was important," Alexander said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Lily, you know me. You know I wouldn't do this to you." "I thought I knew you," she said quietly. "But after everything that's happened, I don't know what to believe anymore." Alexander's heart sank. He had fought so hard to rebuild her trust, and now it felt like they were back at square one. "This is exactly what she wants," he said, his voice firm. "My mother. She's trying to tear us apart again." "Maybe," Lily said, her voice wavering. "But what if she's not the only one I should be afraid of?" The words cut deeper than Alexander expected, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. Finally, he said, "If you don't trust me, then let me prove it. I'll find out who sent these photos, and I'll show you the truth." Alexander wasted no time launching an investigation. He called in every favor he was owed, hiring a team of private investigators to trace the source of the photos. Days turned into weeks as they followed leads, each one more frustratingly elusive than the last. Meanwhile, the tension between Alexander and Lily grew, the unresolved questions hanging over them like a dark cloud. One evening, as Alexander reviewed the latest report from his investigators, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from Lily. "We need to talk." He found her sitting on the balcony, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the city lights. She looked tired, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes. "I've been thinking," she said, as he sat down beside her. "About us. About everything." Alexander braced himself, unsure of what she was about to say. "I want to believe you," she said finally. "I want to believe that we can make this work. But I need to know that you're all in. That you're not just doing this out of guilt or obligation." "I am all in," Alexander said, his voice steady. "Lily, you and Noah are the only things that matter to me. I've spent my whole life chasing success, but none of it means anything without you." Lily searched his face, her own emotions warring within her. Finally, she reached out and took his hand. "Then let's stop letting the past control us. Let's move forward, together." For the first time in weeks, Alexander felt a glimmer of hope. But just as they began to mend their fractured relationship, a late-night call shattered their fragile peace. The voice on the other end was cold and unfamiliar. "If you care about your son, you'll do exactly as I say." The ominous phone call lingered in Alexander's mind long after the line went dead. He had written down every word, replaying the voice in his head, a calm yet menacing tone, delivering a clear threat. "If you care about your son, you'll do exactly as I say. No police. No questions. Wait for instructions." Alexander hadn't told Lily about the call. She was just starting to trust him again, and the last thing he wanted was to reignite her fears. But as he paced the living room in the early hours of the morning, he couldn't shake the dread creeping up his spine. This wasn't Eleanor's style. She was manipulative, yes, but outright threats? No. This felt like something else entirely. By sunrise, Alexander had already called his private investigators, instructing them to trace the call and dig deeper into anyone who might have a motive to target him, or Noah. That evening, as Lily put Noah to bed, Alexander's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from an unknown number. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central Park. Come alone. No police. Bring no devices." His blood ran cold. He stared at the message, his mind racing. Whoever was behind this clearly knew his every move. They had chosen a public place, yet insisted on secrecy. It was a calculated move, one designed to keep him on edge. Alexander didn't respond. Instead, he forwarded the message to his investigators, attaching a note. "Be discreet. I need to know who's behind this." But even as he sought answers, he knew there was no avoiding the meeting. He had to go, if only to ensure Noah's safety. The next morning, Alexander arrived at Central Park just before 10 a.m. His usually confident demeanor replaced by a guarded tension. He wore a casual jacket, his phone and watch left behind as instructed. The crisp autumn air bit at his skin as he scanned the park for any sign of his contact. He didn't have to wait long. A man in a dark coat and hat approached, his face obscured by sunglasses and a scarf. He stopped a few feet away, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. "Alexander Morgan," the man said, his voice low. It was the same voice from the phone call. "Who are you?" Alexander demanded. "What do you want?" The man smirked, pulling a small envelope from his coat and tossing it onto the bench between them. "All in good time. First, open that." Alexander hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to walk away. But he couldn't ignore the possibility that this man held answers that could protect his son. He picked up the envelope and opened it, revealing a single photograph. His heart stopped. The photo showed Noah bundled in his stroller, with Lily pushing him along a quiet street. It had been taken that morning. "What is this?" Alexander asked, his voice dangerously low. "A reminder," the man said, stepping closer. "We know everything about you, where you live, where she shops, even the time your son takes his naps. You have a choice, Mr. Morgan. Cooperate or risk losing everything." Alexander's fists clenched at his sides. "What do you want?" The man leaned in, his smirk fading. "Information. Your company's latest acquisition, Bennett Technologies. We need access to their proprietary software. You're the only one who can get it for us." Alexander's mind raced. Bennett Technologies was a cybersecurity firm with cutting-edge encryption technology. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just some petty criminal. This was corporate espionage at its highest level, and they were using his family as leverage. "And if I refuse?" Alexander asked, his voice steady despite the rage bubbling beneath the surface. The man's smirk returned. "Then I'd start saying my goodbyes." As soon as the man disappeared into the crowd, Alexander returned to his car, his hands trembling with suppressed fury. He wanted nothing more than to call the police, to put every resource he had into tracking this man down. But he couldn't take that risk, not with Lily and Noah's safety hanging in the balance. Instead, he called his head of security, giving explicit instructions to increase surveillance on their home and follow Lily and Noah everywhere. "I want eyes on them 24/7, he said. "No exceptions." Then he called his private investigators. "Find out everything you can about Bennett Technologies, especially any recent threats or breaches, and dig deeper into my mother's connections. I don't care how unlikely it seems. This might lead back to her." But deep down, Alexander knew this wasn't Eleanor's doing. She had her faults, but even she wouldn't stoop this low. Whoever was behind this was operating on a completely different level. Over the next few days, Alexander played the role they expected of him. He attended meetings, made calls, and gave no indication that anything was amiss. Meanwhile, his investigators uncovered troubling information. Bennett Technologies had recently been approached by a foreign conglomerate known for its shady dealings. When Bennett refused their offer, several of their executives received threats. It was clear now that Alexander was dealing with professionals, people who wouldn't hesitate to follow through on their threats if he didn't comply. But Alexander wasn't about to hand over sensitive data. He had spent his life building Apex Enterprises into a powerhouse, and he wasn't going to let anyone undermine it or endanger his family. The breakthrough came late one night. One of his investigators called with urgent news. "We traced the man you met in the park. He's a known operative for a corporate espionage group based overseas. And get this, there's a connection to your mother." Alexander's stomach dropped. "What kind of connection?" "The group has ties to a charity Eleanor Morgan funds. It's possible she's been funneling money to them, knowingly or not." Alexander felt a surge of anger and disbelief. Could his mother truly be involved, even indirectly? Or was this just another layer of manipulation? The next morning, Alexander confronted Eleanor once again. "Did you fund a charity tied to a corporate espionage ring?" he demanded, throwing the investigator's report onto her desk. Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she scanned the documents. "I don't appreciate your tone, Alexander," she said coldly. "But no, I had no idea, and if I did, it was unintentional." Alexander studied her, searching for any sign of deceit. Finally, he said, "If I find out you had anything to do with this, anything, you'll regret it." Eleanor's lips tightened, but she didn't respond. The showdown with the blackmailer came 2 days later. Alexander arranged a meeting, claiming he had the data they wanted. But instead of handing over the information, he brought his security team and the authorities, who had been working discreetly to track the group. The sting operation was a success. The blackmailer and his associates were apprehended, and Alexander ensured Lily and Noah were safe before returning home. In the aftermath, Alexander stood on the balcony of their home, the weight of the past weeks pressing heavily on his shoulders. Lily joined him, holding Noah in her arms. "It's over," he said quietly. "They're gone." Lily nodded, but her eyes held a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "What about your mother?" Alexander sighed. "I don't know. She claims she didn't know, but I'm not sure I can believe her anymore." Lily reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "We'll figure it out together." Alexander looked at her, his heart swelling with gratitude and love. For the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope, not just for himself, but for the family they were building. Months later, Alexander and Lily stood in the courtyard of a small chapel, surrounded by friends and loved ones. Noah, now a happy, chubby-cheeked baby, sat in Lily's arms, babbling as the ceremony unfolded. Alexander took Lily's hand, his voice steady as he said, "I promise to protect you, to cherish you, and to never let anything come between us again." Lily smiled through her tears. "I promise the same." As they exchanged vows, the past seemed to fade away, replaced by the promise of a brighter future, and as they kissed, sealing their commitment to each other and their son, Alexander knew that for the first time in his life, he had everything he truly needed: